Tonight we begin with Richard Fisher. Richard Fisher made substantial resources in his own business early in life and decided to devote himself to public service in major ways. We know him best in Texas business by his leadership of the Dallas branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. He was the president of the Dallas Fed. As such, was instrumental in guiding Texas business through the recession and beyond, the recovery, to levels, participating by his voice in the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, in guiding the country to the historic levels of economic accomplishment we see today. Please turn your eyes to the tape on Richard Fisher.
I've loved everything, but public service, if you're successful in the private sector, you should do some public service. And you don't get paid anything, you give up a lot, but you're representing the greatest country in the world. The man who trained me, Robert Rosa, he told me that the purest form of public service would be to serve the Federal Reserve. I never dreamed I would become President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, or that I'd sit on the Federal Open Market Committee, but I did, and I loved it, loved every moment of
it. Richard's personal background is absolutely fascinating. His parents were immigrants. He came from a background that was not at all privileged.
My father had had difficulties as a child. He was a homeless boy. He was arrested for begging for food in the streets at the age of 5 years. My father had no education. My mother had no education. I'd gone to the Naval Academy, to Harvard, to Oxford, and Stanford. And I remember my father saying, "We've gone from no education to too much in one generation. Get a job." And that was the beginning of my business and financial career. Well, I started out on Wall Street in 1975. I was recruited into a firm called Brown Brothers Harriman. And then as 1987 was approaching, the markets were very rich. I felt the markets were overpriced. I didn't believe in something called portfolio insurance. I wanted out. In fact, I wanted to go short. And so I left Brown Brothers Harriman and created Fisher Capital Management. We compounded money at 23.6% a year for 9 years running. And then I had gotten to know Bill Clinton a little bit when he was governor, and he offered me the job of being Deputy United States Trade Representative with the rank of Ambassador. And it took me 3 nanoseconds, and I accepted. I've always wanted to serve my country that took in my parents, and so I became Deputy U.S. Trade Representative. And over a course of 4 years, I negotiated over 40 different treaties or agreements, and it was a magnificent experience.
Richard is known for his speeches. He can take the most complex subject and articulate and explain that subject in terms that anybody can understand. I had the pleasure of chairing the search committee when the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas was searching for its new president. We ended up with 6 finalists. We had one question for all of the candidates, same question: why do you want this job? And Richard's answer was, serving with the Federal Reserve is the purest form of government service. At that point, we could just shut down the entire search process. And he came on to be a great president of the Federal Reserve Bank.
I served as president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas from 2005 to 2015. Alan Greenspan actually was the one who gave me this advice. What I should do is start talking to people that were in the real economy, as he called it, and get a sense of how they viewed the economy, because those are the people we made policy for.
He had a list of 30 or 40 people. He would call each person, visit with them approximately 20 minutes, get their views as to what was happening in their business.
And I always found it fascinating. And I always remember sometimes I would answer a question and say, "Look, I'm no economist." And he said, "I know, that's why I want to talk to you." So it's obvious he was trying to get data and information on what was really going on the ground in the U.S. economy from people who were engaged day in and day out.
His time in Washington had prepared him for the responsibilities within the Federal Reserve. His impact on the state and the nation was huge.
What I love about Texas is you can become somebody having been nobody. First, I've always wanted to give back to the places that were good to me, and so we've given gifts to the universities that I attended. I was asked to be on the board at the Dallas Museum of Art. I was on the Symphony Board, and then I became chairman of Goodwill here in Dallas, which I found very gratifying. I lucked out. It's easy to luck out in Texas. I really feel that way. I love this state.
This is a man with an insatiable curiosity. One could almost say to recreate oneself on a regular basis is something that I see Richard having done for many, many years.
Richard has been successful in virtually everything he's done in life, and a measure of success is how one confronts obstacles and overcomes them, and that is Richard Fisher.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an impossible task this evening. How do you explain Richard Fisher in 90 seconds or less? A first-generation American and self-made successful entrepreneur who attended the Naval Academy, Harvard, and Oxford with distinction at every point along the way. A leading Wall Street financier with one of the country's oldest and most revered companies, Brown Brothers Harriman, ambassador and trade negotiator around the world, a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science, an advisor to cabinet members and presidents, the leader of the Federal Reserve Bank in Dallas, not a branch, from 2005 to 2015, the most difficult and challenging period in our country since the Great Depression, a philanthropist involved both nationally and locally in dozens of worthy causes, and oh, what a legendary raconteur. Richard's also a man that started his business career with a paper route in middle school, was a multi-sport athlete in both high school and college, and worked his way through school with several jobs, including that of a short-order cook and as a teacher at a maximum security women's penitentiary in Massachusetts. You really are a slacker, Richard. I mean, really, no patents, no Guinness World Records. Canadian author and activist Irshad Manji coined a phrase for our world, which I consider apt in this context. She says that we live in a world that is deliciously complex. I think it's accurate to describe my friend Richard Fisher in the same way, as deliciously complex. And weren't we all lucky, those of us in this room, to have a deliciously complex Texan at the helm of the Federal Reserve Bank for a decade and sounding the alarm before anyone else about the looming financial crisis, as well as a path to recovery afterwards. Warren Buffett, the famous Oracle of Omaha, says that if you're born in America, you've already won the ovarian lottery. And that's true as far as it goes, but it is a rare person, having won the lottery, who then spends his or her time and energy serving others. Devoted husband, father, and friend, a man who has given himself selflessly in service of his country and his community over and over again. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the 1949 ovarian lottery winner and the newest member of the Texas Business Hall of Fame, Richard Fisher.
Well, thank you, Doug Fauché. That was an unusual and wonderful introduction. And I want to thank my friends and colleagues from the Federal Reserve who are here, my colleagues from AT&T Tenet Healthcare and PepsiCo and CNBC who came to this impressive ceremony this evening, to Ray Hunt and to Randall Stevenson for their kind words. And I want to say also thank you to Meredith Walker, who's done extraordinary work with her team to make this a magical moment. Well, my wife, Missy, is here together with her son, Jack, who's a senior studying economics and business at UT. She's also with the handsome husband of my daughter, Allison Ware, who is a vice president of Frost. My incredible daughter-in-law, Osa, who is president and COO of a company called iStation. And her husband, which I have to say is my remarkable son, Anders, who's a partner in the Global Investment Fund and a managing director for HPS Partners. And then my talented other son, Miles, is awaiting the arrival of my 7th grandchild in Los Angeles, but is the founder of Bixby Coffee Company. As you might infer, everybody in our family is involved in business. We believe in the power of private enterprise and the good that business can do. Especially in this election cycle, I've been thinking of a quote from Winston Churchill. He said, and I quote, "Some see private enterprise as a predatory animal to be shot. Others look on it as a cow to be milked. But a few see it as a sturdy horse pulling a wagon." Well, I and my wife and children are among the few. We believe the wagon businesses pull is the strength of Texas, the strength of the United States, and we're proud to be surrounded by all of you tonight who celebrate free enterprise at its best. Now, my son Anders was a bicentennial baby. He was born in 1976 in New York City, shortly after I started my career on Wall Street. When he was just a few months old, I was swept up in the mood of thankful patriotism for the country that took in my parents, and I took Anders in my arms to see the Statue of Liberty. And on the ferry ride back, I looked at the skyline of Manhattan, and I thought to myself, New York is really a magnificent place, but it's already established. It is the past. I need to go where the future is and take my son and family there. That place was Dallas and Texas. And from the moment I arrived here with my family, I understood exactly what Georgia O'Keeffe, the mother of American modernism painting, wrote when she came to paint the Texas landscape. She said, "I couldn't believe that Texas was real, the same big, wonderful thing that oceans and the highest mountains are." Well, I had made the right decision to become a Texan. And as has been mentioned, I grew up in what might be euphemistically described as an economically challenged family. My father was an abandoned child. He lived a desperate childhood begging for food and shelter in the streets of Queensland, Australia. My mother was born in a tin-roofed hut in the South African veld. They came to America, the promised land, for a much better life. And it worked. They never had much money. They often had none. I still am haunted by the memory as a 5th grade boy going with my mother to hawk her engagement ring in order to put food on our table in one of our most desperate moments. But still, my mother and father created a life of promise for their children. And with their love and encouragement to study and work hard, I was able to go to the best of schools and land pretty good jobs, earn good money, and live a good life in Dallas in the big, wonderful, bigger than oceans and mountains state of Texas. And like many children of immigrants, I always felt the need to pay it back to my country. I was lucky to have been born here in the lottery of 1949. And so my life has been punctuated in the private sector, punctuated by service in 2 presidential administrations and a decade at the Federal Reserve. I understand that I am the first Federal Reserve Bank president to receive this honor. I hope it will inspire the young scholarship students who you met this evening to follow a similar path, to do more than just make money, but to give back to the city and state and country in which they have been blessed to make their fortunes and to prosper. I have been blessed to be able to do so, and I am honored to be here on the stage tonight. Every Christmas, like some other people in this room, I receive a big old pecan pie from one of the true Texas legends, Red McCombs. Red may be surprised tonight to be quoted alongside of Churchill and Georgia O'Keeffe, but the beautiful words that he's carved into the wooden box holding that pie are equally eloquent. It says, "Thank your lucky stars, you're in Texas." Well, I thank my lucky stars I'm an American, I thank my lucky stars I'm a Texan, and I thank my lucky stars that you have honored me tonight. Thank you very much.